type your questions there. So let's discuss why there are many processes. So why can't we have a single process in the backend of Tableau server so that it is very easy for us to maintain the Tableau server. So when someone thinks of Tableau server, right? So we might think of a dashboard, or you might think of something more visually appealing that has been developed by an analyst or a developer in the backend, and then that has been brought into the front end to be shared to n number of users uh, in the business, more more than hundreds or thousands number of people who are going to access in the front end. So that is not just about the Tableau source. So what we'll see, what is the backbone in terms of making those visualizations successful, where our developers or analysts has taken a lot of days to build them, and what processes that makes them successful to be loading, or maybe the data refreshes, or many other functions that are available in the front end. So myself, Lakshmi Narayana, I'm a senior BA consultant, and I've been in Tableau ambassador as well. So you can follow my YouTube channel or blog to know more about Tableau server. It's Ask Lakshmi. So I'll share in the end of the slides. So now, yeah. So when we think of Tableau server, what we all think, it's like the fancy dashboard that the developers put a lot of days and hard work in cleaning up the data and building those dashboards, and giving the access of those dashboards to different people or different business persons who needs access to those dashboards, and opening the dashboards, just uh, looking at different insights that have been already developed, or maybe by using the functionality like Ask Data, which is the NLP engine, wherein you can write a question and you can get the visuals of it. Let's say, how are my sales doing for so and so quarter in so and so region? So you write a question and then you get the answer. A developer has, or an analyst who has put a lot of days of efforts in building a wonderful dashboard with a lot of insights, and just looking or opening that insight in the browser or maybe a mobile. So that is what comes to our mind when we think of a Tableau server. Yes, that is right. But there are many other things. So to make these core functionalities successful, there are many processes that are working in the backend. It's not just a single process, or it's not a single service that makes everything happens just like that. So what are those different processes, right? So when we install a Tableau server in maybe a Windows or maybe a Linux kind of machine, can be a 2 node or a 3 node cluster. So it doesn't matter how many number of nodes that you install, but when you install a Tableau server, so it comes with lots of processes like VSQL, VSPortal, Backgrounder, Data Engine, or the cluster controller, and many more. So what are these all processes that are doing in the backend? So let's say I clicked on a visualization. I clicked on a dashboard. So when the dashboard rendering happens, that spinning happens in the front end that you see. In the back end, your Tableau server does a lot of things. Like if it is a live based dashboard, it goes to from Tableau server, wherever your Linux or Windows machine is hosted, it goes back to your actual data source, which can be an XSOL or an Oracle or a SQL server or a Google BigQuery. So it goes to that actual data source and brings the data onto Tableau server. So where is, or how is the data? Uh, how is the data that is there? It is just in the number of rows, right? Or there can be more number of rows, and your Tableau core functionality, which converts the data, which is your SQL, which converts that rows and columns of data into different visuals. So that is the of key functionality of your SQL server. And the WIS portal, the portal that you logs in, right? The portal that you logs in, where you enter a username and password and then click login inside. So that entire portal will be maintained by your WIS portal process. And also we have a gateway. Gateway is nothing but just the when you hit the URL in the Chrome, or maybe a mobile device, or maybe you are trying to publish a dashboard from your desktop to Tableau server. So the first hit that goes to, it's your gateway. So likewise, there are many other processes which plays different roles. So like, as I said, right, it is not a single process that does everything. So there are different processes that come in together in order to complete one set of requests to the end user, or maybe data extracts, or maybe your repository. So likewise, there are so many things. So we looked at a couple of them. So I mean, we discussed about a couple of them. Like we discussed about the visql, we discussed about the vis portal. So visql, as I said, is the key for converting your data which is there in terms of rows and columns into the visualizations. So that's the core functionality of visql process. And also your vis portal, which is responsible for the logging in, like you enter a username and password and then taking care of the authentication process. And once the authentication is successful, then opening the web page for the user. So everything will be taken care by your vis portal. So let's say, if assume it's like hypothetical, so everything is being handled by one single process, so how would be? So if something goes wrong, where would I go and check, right? So if something is not working as expected, let's say the logging is not expected, I mean, the logging is not working, or maybe the visuals are not loading properly. So everything will be handled by one process, then it will be way more difficult for a server administrator to check at a single source for all the transactions that are happening in the backend. So when you have somebody responsible for one specific function, if that is not working as expected, then you directly go to that specific process only. So if say I published a dashboard which was working fine without any issues on my desktop, and it is not working fine as expected on the server, so whom should I look at? That's the functionality, or that's the responsibility of my visql. Then I immediately go to my visql process and I'll see in the logs like how much time it is taking, or maybe is it the rendering itself the taking time, or the dashboard design has been taking a lot of time. So we can run a performance recording immediately, and we can look at all of those metrics. Or sometimes what happens, even if you enter a right username and password, you might not be able to log in. So in which cases you can go and check your vis portal and some other services that are already there. So in a similar way, so your gateway, as I said, you make a request from your computer to Tableau server, and the request will first handled by your gateway process, not any other process. So once your gateway process says, okay, the request is fine, it has come from a right resource, then it sends the request to the next available process, which is your vis portal for authentication purpose. So once the vis portal has been done, which is taking care of the authentication and everything, then it will be handled by your visql, like, okay, what is the dashboard that the user has opened, and whether the dashboard is connecting to a live based or an extract based data source. If it is a live or extract, is it an embedded or published outside? So what kind of data source is it? So where do we have all that information? Your visql can't store the data, so it will read the data from your repository. So Tableau server, when you install a Tableau server, it will come with an inbuilt repository. So that repository, what is it? It's a Postgres database. So that Postgres database will record all of the information. All, when I say all of the information, each and everything that you do on a Tableau server. At what time a specific user is logging in, or maybe what dashboard has published at what time, what workbook has been viewed when, and which extracts are running at what point in time, and if they are failing, at what time they are failing, or how many number of users I have in total. So all of these metadata information that is related to my Tableau server will be stored in my Postgres database. And when somebody opens a dashboard in the front end, it's your Postgres responsibility to make sure, or it's your Postgres responsibility to give that data to visql and vis portal, whether the user has a right to open it or not, which is the authorization comes into picture. So likewise, these are all the processes that works together in order to make every function in the front end successful and working as expected. Now, So, okay, fine. I have lot number of processes. I have lot number of services in the backend. But if I want to reading about them individually, okay, you can do that. I mean, vSQL does this thing, Cache server does this thing, Vis portal does this thing, or maybe data engine which creates the extracts in the backend. That is fine. I can do. But how can I read? How can I understand how this entire flow works? Right. So maybe somebody opened a dashboard. So what are all the processes that are involved in this process? Or if somebody is trying to log in into the server, so what are the processes that are involved? How do you know the architecture more better? So that is where Tableau has given a dashboard, okay, in the Tableau public, where you can open the dashboard and see. So which, though this is quite useful dashboard, I mean, it's a lot actually. So it's quite useful, a lot of dashboard for understanding the entire architecture, how different processes they work together. So as I said, let's try to replicate a scenario. So what is the scenario? Somebody is accessing a view. So what is that view? So when I say view, it can be multiple views. It can be a view from your already cached view, or it can be an embedded extract, or it can be a published, it's picking up from a published extract. So it can be from anywhere. So maybe I'll take embedded live connection. Okay. So as soon as I open this, so you can see the dot has been appeared at client, nothing but somebody is making a request to access a particular view on Tableau server. So which might come from a browser or a desktop or a tab or a tablet or a mobile. So step 1 and 2, you select a combination, and step 3, it will take you through the flow. Okay, I moved a bit onto right hand side. So under step 3, you can see, as I said, the first request will go to your gateway process. So you can see here, or you can hover over your mouse, and in the tooltip, you will see the gateway receives the request and forwards it to whom? The application server, because the application server is the process which is responsible for your authentication, because not every user, whoever has a Tableau URL, they can't log in. So it will have a specific authentication mechanism. So it might be in the backend being supported by a SAML or a Kerberos or some other mechanism, but it has some security in the front end, wherein in order to log in, you have to type in your username and password, and your application server is the process which checks whether a logged in user is a right user or not, right? So after that, so once the authentication is successful, then the request will go to your vSQL server, because vSQL server is the process which opens the dashboard up. I mean, which converts the entire data into visual appearance. So what the request goes to vSQL server. So what your vSQL server does, it immediately checks with the repository saying, okay, Lakshmi has logged in. So has he access to this dashboard as at all or not? So that will be checked by your vSQL with the help of the data that is available in your Postgres repository. So this is your repository process. So now the request first comes to gateway, the gateway process, and from there it will go to application server, which checks the authentication. From there, it goes to vSQL in order to render the dashboard. But before rendering the dashboard, it will check with the repository whether the user have access to it or not. So after that, so once it says, okay, yes, Lakshmi has the access to it, then your vSQL server connects to the data sources, because every workbook is being driven by a data source. So likewise, it connects to data sources. So in this case, we selected a live connection. So what do you mean by live connection? Live is nothing but your data source will be there out of your Tableau server somewhere else. If it is an extract, then it is a snapshot of data which exists within the Tableau server, wherever your Tableau server located. So there itself, the extract copy will be there. But in this case, it is a live, which is an external data source. So what it does, your SQL server will check out for the drivers. So what connection that it has to made on the specific Tableau server. So once the connection has been identified, then it passes it through the wherever our data source is. So once it reaches out to the data source, then the data will be brought back to your SQL server in order to make it as a dashboard. Rather, so how the data stores in your database or maybe Excel files or flat files, it will be in rows and columns format. But what we see in the front end, it is all visuals. So SQL server reads the data from here and brings the data back and then gives the data to the gateway, because how user has communicated with us, it is through the gateway process only. So entire communication happens via gateway. So you can see the request started here with the gateway. It has gone here and then it has gone to SQL and then to the external data. And then it has come back to the user saying, okay, this is the your rendered view. This is your renders dashboard. So this is an example how the entire architecture flow works. So in the similar way, there are so many flows or the so many architectural flows that you can select here in order to check. So let us look at one more. So authentication, maybe we'll do it with Active Directory. Okay, so just select none because we don't have step 2 to select here. It is just the authentication, how the user gets authenticated. It's like you open the URL in the client. The client can be, again, the process is same. So it's like it goes to gateway and then your gateway will check with your application server in order to open the login page, like enter username and password. So that page will be taken care by this. So immediately it will go to your repository because your repository is the super data source which will store all of the data that is there. Is it a local or it's an Active Directory or it's a 3-node cluster or it's a 2-node cluster? All of the metadata information will be stored in your repository. So your request will go to your repository. From there, a repository will says, okay, hey, this is not local authentication, it's an Active Directory. So go and check with AD, not me. So that information will be fed back to your application server. Then what happens? Your application server register the response and it gives that response to gateway, because gateway is the process which talks to your Active Directory service, which is this Active Directory controller. So AD controller, which will be in the organizations, which will be maintained by the Windows or ADs or security teams in external. So this is all Tableau server, whatever is there in this box. So this is all Tableaus, this is client, this is external data sources. This is all, again, this is out of Tableau. So your gateway has sent the request to your AD controller saying, okay, we received a request from so and so user. This is the password, this is the username. So is it right or wrong? So once your AD says, yes, this is the right user, or maybe this is the wrong user, then that will be passed to your end user. So if he's a right user, then the authentication is successful. If he's a wrong user, then the authentication fails. Application server will not show the web page if it fails. But in this case, so it is assuming that it's a positive. So you can read out each and every step, what is happening here. Then based on that, you can go from there. So in similarly, if you check for the local authentication, right? So we checked for AD. Let's look out for local. So local again, same, it goes to, let me drag it to half completely. Okay, so here till here it is the same. So any request going, I mean, any request that first goes to your gateway, that is fixed. Okay, and then application server. So depends on the request, it goes forward. Okay, so in this case, you can see here. So it's the external authentication is not in this case, it is a local authentication. So what does your application server does? Your application server itself verifies the authentication of user, whether the given username or password is wrong or right, immediately with your repository, and it gives that back information to your gateway. Okay, and then At the end, it will show the web page because everything is fine and there. So this is how you can understand the entire processes workflow. So there are many permutations and combinations in here, so which you can select and see how different processes come together and they work. So why you need to understand the processes, even being in a, I mean, being on the development side. So do I need to understand how the process architecture works? I will not say sure, but maybe, because when something goes wrong, maybe your extract is failing, or maybe users are not able to log in, or maybe the web page itself is not available, then it is something that you can, being as a developer, still you can advise your administrator, okay, uh, so after entering the username and password, it's not accepting me as a user, so go and check in the SQL if it is a local authentication. So if it is not local, go and check with the Active Directory team what the issue is there. So you can be an advisor instead of, okay, please admin check this. So that gives you a more confident in terms of working with the Tableau server. So again, it's up to you. So if you want to pick up that route, yes, I would definitely suggest. So how to go or how to learn these things. So first, I would say start with different processes that are there. So that is how you can, even how I have started. So Tableau server processes. So hit the first link in the Tableau documentation itself. So Tableau server processes, you can see, all right? So it gives a detailed explanation. What is the process name? What is it being called in the backend? And what is the purpose of it? And in detailed explanation, like what is an ask data? So obviously, when we have a published data source, you click on the data source, the first tab that you get in the Tableau server, I mean, in the browser, that is ask data. You write a question, it immediately makes up a visualization from that. So you can directly view it. If you're, so that is what. So if you're writing the question, but it is somehow the visualization is not appearing, or maybe the ask data itself is taking a lot of time. So then what you can do, hey admin, can you check if the ask data process is green or not? I mean the tick mark, nothing but it's up and running without any issues, right? So that is how you can read about different processes. There are lots of processes, but just reading the process obviously will not give you the architectural understanding of the system, which you can get from these permutations and combinations. Like you select something here, you access a view, and then here, so previously we selected a live, maybe now you selected an embedded extract. So what would be the major difference between live and extract? In extract, it will not go beyond your Tableau server. So if I do this in an extract, it will not go beyond your Tableau server, because what is an extract? It's a snapshot of data which being pulled onto Tableau server on a specific frequency. But it is not when user opens it, it is when the schedule is there. So when user opens, it immediately check within the data engine itself, right? And then it reads out the, I mean, it gives out the visualization to the end user. That's it, done. So these are all the different things. I mean, yeah. So step one, read about the different processes. Step two, go through this dashboard, which I'll share with you all in the email post the session. So you can go to this Tableau public also, or yeah, I got it. So in the Tableau servers page itself, if you go down to the entire bottom of the page, so here you will see the same has been embedded onto this page. So I opened the same one this on the other page also. So you can look at this one also. So now we discussed what different processes are there and what they do, and in an architecture wise, how they are interlinked, right? So how they are interlinked. So we looked at all of these things, but why Tableau has built these things in such a way? Why can't it be a single process to maintain the entire Tableau server architecture? Why I have to have these many things? And normally, the most common question that I get in a day-to-day operations, or when we do some maintenance, right? So when we restart a Tableau server, it's like it takes 20 minutes. It depends on how large your cluster is, or it might take 15 to 20 minutes. So most of the times people say, okay, why it is taking so much time? It's a simple Windows service. Why can't it restart in a couple of minutes? No, that's not the case. The Tableau server takes a lot of time, maybe 15 minutes or 10 minutes or 20 minutes to restart, because it has lots of processes in the backend which are working together in order to make your Tableau server successful to be worked. Now the question is why there are so many processes. As I said, we looked at what are those processes for, but why there are so many processes? Because the answer is simple. When you have one function dedicated to one process, it is more easy for us. It's more easy for a administrator to do the maintenance or to do the troubleshooting when the things happen. Okay, guys, if you have any questions, please ask the questions in Q&A. I'll answer those questions at the end of the session, sure. Yeah, so why there are so many? Because as I said, if you have only one process responsible for one single function in the front end, then it is easy for administrator to troubleshoot the things out there. So that is one first thing. And also, when we have, let's say my Tableau server has a lot of extracts. Okay, let's take an hypothetical situation. So my Tableau server has a lot of extracts. There are so many extracts that runs in the backend, or so many subscriptions that runs in the backend. So what is the process that is responsible for extract? That is backgrounder processes. So let me, yeah, so you can see running of an extract. Yeah, so refresh and extract. So who is the process responsible for the extract? So that is your backgrounder. So your backgrounder takes the responsibility to run the extracts. See, backgrounder, it starts with the backgrounder. So what I can do, rather increasing all of the processes, I will simply increase my backgrounder processes more on the cluster, right? I have a single node with a 16 core system wherein I have so many processes in the backend running, but my Tableau server is sophisticated. I want it to be run more number of extracts. I have a less number of users usage. Then what I can do, I increase the backgrounder processes individually so that they will be able to handle more number of backgrounder requests, more number of the extracts or subscriptions. So what you can do, you can easily scale up your processes without any major architectural changes, and the redundancy will be more. Also, let's say if I have two backgrounders, um, if I have two number of backgrounders, and even if one backgrounder fails, then I will have other backgrounders to continue the operations, which is giving me a high availability, so that even if one backgrounder goes down, I have the flexibility to run my operations. It's not a complete blockage for me. So these are the different reasons, important reasons why there are so many processes. So like scale up and scale out is way more easy, and the redundancy is better. And also the one of the good things is, like, let's say you have a single node architecture with maybe 16 core or maybe 8 core, but you're limited in terms of the system resources. Then what you can do, VSQL, which is responsible for your dashboard loads, and backgrounder, which is responsible for running your extracts. So you can increase these two dynamically without restarting your entire cluster. Okay, so how can I do? So dynamic topology changes in Tableau server. So what we can do, we can increase either backgrounder or VSQL server, increase and decrease both. So increase and decrease these two processes dynamically so that they will be able to handle the more number of requests. So what I can do, let's say my office hours are, I mean, the business hours are 9 to 5, maybe UK or US times. So during that time, I'll set my backgrounders to just two so that they will not, sorry, they will run less number of extracts and the users dashboard loads will be much better. But once my business times are over, what will I do? I'll increase my backgrounder nodes to maybe 4 processes, right? Maybe 6 processes, so that they're capable of handling more number of extracts. And also I will schedule my extracts to the off business hours, and applying these changes will not require a restart. So that is what the dynamic topology changes is about. So it requires no restart. So you can increase, you can decrease the backgrounders or SQL process without a restart, which will make an efficient use of your existing hardware resources. That is another thing, right? So likewise, there are many advantages of having these many processes in terms of easy scale up, scale out, redundancy, increase the processes dynamically to make use of your hardware more efficiently. And also the last and important thing is high availability. You can have two number of SQLs on the same server. So even if one SQL goes down because of some reason, you will have other processes running. Also, when you have a cluster, right? So when you have a cluster with couple of nodes or 3 nodes, you can put your backgrounders on second node. So how we can do? So again, same thing, Tableau server, 2 node, recommended hardware. Yeah, so recommended baselines. So what you can do, so this is a single standalone, but I would like to have, so this is how your 2 node architecture looks like. You have so many processes in here. I'm keeping my backgrounders more onto, you can see I don't have backgrounder processes on this node at all. I have all of my backgrounders only on node 2, so that even huge number of users accessing my cluster, they will not be impacted even if there are many backgrounder tasks like extracts, flows, subscriptions are running, because those are completely being taken care by my node 2. So this is advantage of having multiple processes, because you can simply switch the processes onto other node which you want to have more, right? So this is, and you can see, I mean, there are, you can type in like 3 node recommendations, high availability recommendations. You will see a lot of recommendations also from Tableau. Uh, so coming back to our presentation, so this is, we looked at the processes dashboard. So if you have any questions, you can put in the Q&A. I'll try to answer towards the end of the sessions. If you want to know more about Tableau server, yes, you can follow my YouTube channel or blog. Both are in the name of Ask Lakshmi. Thanks for joining us today again. I'm